For this video or this screencast, we're going to go back to the Zhou dynasty a little bit so that we can do some comparisons of the Zhou dynasty and the Qin dynasty that will replace it. So if you remember there at the very end of the Zhou dynasty, it's the Warring States period. The Zhou dynasty ends in 221 BC, and that's when the Qin dynasty begins. The Qin dynasty only lasts for about 15 years, and it is vastly different. So I want to go ahead and take a look at that. And by the end of this, we should be able to understand a little bit more about the mandate of heaven, what was the idea of legalism, which I talked about earlier. Why did merchants do worse under the Qin dynasty? How did Chinese philosophy and moral codes restrict women? And we'll also look too at these characteristics of these empires. Again, there are our terracotta warriors, which I mentioned in our last video, but I also forgot to mention that I got to see them. They were at the National Geographic Museum in Washington, D.C., and so they had a really cool museum exhibit on these guys. So again, I encourage you to watch I know it's an optional video, but encourage you to watch it if you get a chance. I'll be posting that for you later. So looking at the Zhou and the Qin. So again, going back and doing a little bit of a review, our tale of two dynasties begins after the fall of the Shang dynasty, which ruled from about 1600 to 1050 BC. The Shang dynasty only loosely controlled their territory. Local regions were ruled by their own elite. In 1050, taking advantage of the weak Shang leader, the Zhou rose up and overthrew the Shang. The Zhou controlled eastern China from north of the Yellow River down to the Yangtze River. But like the Shang, they left regional control to local leaders. History would, as they say, repeat itself. The Zhou weakened and the Qin dynasty took over, conquering most of what is now China and creating the first Chinese empire. In 1046 BC, the Zhou king Wu fought and defeated the Shang at the Battle of Muyi. But fought may be stretching it, since the Shang troops abandoned their king and went over to Wu willingly. The Zhou claimed the right to overthrow the Shang through the mandate of heaven. This mandate was essentially a permission slip from the gods, allowing people to overthrow any dynasty that had become corrupt. The Zhou claimed divine or religious approval of their takeover. Unfortunately, this mandate also applied to the Zhou, who would themselves be overthrown later. So to point out here we have, here is our Qin dynasty that is here, that's currently here. Here is Lu, here's the state of Lu. This is where Confucius is from. And then we have the Zhou, which are here, or the Zhao, I should say. The Zhao and the Zhou are two different peoples. It's confusing after a little while. Sorry, folks. Impressively, the Zhou dynasty ruled for over 700 years, though that depends on your definition of rule. Zhou kings did not tightly govern their states, and over time found it harder to control them. By 771, the Zhou kings were really just religious figureheads presiding over a group of mostly independent states. These kings could only sit and watch as the states warred against each other, with larger states consuming smaller ones. Around 334 BC, some of the smaller states had to break away from the Zhou. By then, Zhou rulers had lost all power in China. So when all those states were warring with each other, the Qin dynasty moved in and by 221 BC managed to conquer them all. The Qin only ruled for 15 years, but it was significant. King Zheng of Qin wasn't very happy with the title Wang, meaning king. To fully capture his greatness, he developed the title Huangti, making his full name Qin Shi Huangti, meaning August Emperor or First Emperor. He ruled over his empire with an iron fist. This didn't really inspire much love, as 3 assassination attempts suggested. Fear of death drove him to look for an elixir or potion of immortality. Ironically, he died in 210 BC on one of his elixir-seeking trips. He was succeeded by his younger son, Qin Shi, who ruled harshly and cruelly until 206, when he was forced to commit suicide. The Qin dynasty had officially ended. And here is a stone rubbing of Qin era depiction of the 3 assassination attempts against Qin Shi Huangdi. And this is a drawing from around 1850 AD of Qin Shi Huangdi, so a more modern picture of what Qin Shi Huangdi may have looked like. So for administration, the Zhou kings ruled over a largely decentralized kingdom. It was made up of as many as 200 states. These states were largely self-run, with only military and financial obligations to the Zhou. In the beginning, these rulers were family members of the Zhou king. This created a network of states united by kinship, or family ties. It became easier to share ideas and technology, as well as develop a common language for China, now known as Archaic Chinese. This system of rule was similar in many ways to feudalism of medieval Europe. As kinship connections weakened, the leaders of the various states felt less attached to the Zhou king. After all, it wasn't like he was family. By 771, the Zhou had about 170 states of various size, but by the 3rd century BC, only 7 large states remained. The Zhou ruler had less and less control over these states as they fought each other and became larger and more powerful. China became increasingly chaotic as it descended into lawlessness. Eventually, one of these states, controlled by the Qin dynasty, overthrew the Zhou and conquered all of China. Qin rule over China was very different from that of the Zhou. The Qin followed the doctrine of legalism. This was a harsh practice that required strict adherence to the laws, and even minor infractions would result in execution. Qin Shi Huangdi brought his empire under direct control by limiting the power and wealth of the traditional nobles. He also sponsored book burnings, destroying any scholarly works that might inspire people to challenge his rule. The emperor began a number of large-scale, state-sponsored building projects, most notably the Great Wall of China. Religion in China was polytheistic, recognizing and worshiping a variety of gods. Before the Zhou, the Shang rulers had worshipped Ti, a god who controlled destinies. The chief deity of the Zhou kings was Tian, meaning heaven. The Zhou claimed that heaven granted them kingship. As long as a Zhou ruler held the throne, heaven would continue to support them. But by the end of the Zhou period, various states had taken up renewed worship of Ti, challenging Zhou rule. We see this in the title Qin Shi Huangdi, where the D at the end of it represents the god Ti. This is a portrait of Confucius. During the later Zhou, several major thinkers inspired Chinese religion and philosophy. Confucius believed that the violence of his day could be cured if everyone knew their place in the social hierarchy and respected one another. Lao Tzu developed Taoism, which stressed freedom and nature. Sun Tzu, a military man, wrote The Art of War, which has influenced military thinking across the world. In 361 BC, Lord Shang arrived in Qin and began to spread the concept of legalism. According to Shang, the law or fa, was the basis of power, and it was to be applied equally to all. Peasants and noblemen should suffer the same severe punishments. For Shang, the ruler was the absolute power. He was eventually killed. Nobles found his willingness to punish them like peasants to be a little too harsh. But legalism lived on, becoming the defining principle of the Qin Empire. Market economies in China, including the use of bronze coins, began to appear during the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou system of roads made it easier for merchants to distribute goods, resources, and even ideas between states. As trade made them wealthier, merchants began to exploit peasants for labor. However, the ideas of both Confucianism and legalism clashed with business. For Confucians, the wealth and power of the merchants could disrupt society, and so the merchant profession was the lowest possible status. Qin legalists believed that society should be divided between only farmers and soldiers. Merchants need not apply. Anti merchant feelings during the Qin eventually led to many of them being deported. Understandably, there wasn't much commercial growth under Qin rule. The Zhou and Qin followed the traditional separation between men and women that stretched back to at least Chalcolithic times. This is Stone Age times. The basis of this separation appears to have been work. Men and women were assigned specific tasks based on their gender. During the last centuries of the Zhou, women's roles became increasingly formalized and idealized. Men farmed and women spun cloth. These jobs came to symbolize proper order in society. By the end of the Zhou period and the early Qin dynasty, men and women were increasingly separated. This separation became tied into Confucian moral values. In works such as Liu Chang's Lian Xuzhan, we read of women such as Boji. When the palace was on fire, Boji's only option for escape would have put her in view of men. Rather than violate that taboo, she remained behind and burned to death. The Zhou system was destined to collapse. The kings had only a loose control over their states. These states were originally tied to the king through kinship, trusted family members. But over time, kinship ties ended, and state rulers lost any important connection to the king. They became more interested in their own power than in loyally supporting the Zhou king. By the later Zhou period, powerful states competed for dominance while the Zhou rulers were increasingly pushed to the side. Causes for the Qin collapse are difficult to determine. Traditional Chinese historians, including those from the centuries immediately following the Qin, blame the collapse on one of three factors. They are moral decline, usually due to an abusive ruler; two, intellectual failings when a ruler fails to learn from past mistakes; or three, people turning their backs on traditional values of kingship. Western historians tend to look to social factors as causes for the collapse. These include numerous peasant revolts, which weakened the emperor's hold over his empire, causing it to collapse. Regardless of the cause, the Qin left a major mark on China for millennia to come. In fact, the actual name China, which came later than all of these events, likely comes from Qin. This is the tomb of Qin Shi Huangdi, who died in 210 BC. He's buried in this mound. It has not been excavated, but this is part of a much, much larger mortuary complex, and this is where the terracotta warriors are. And there they are again. And here is another one of them. No two terracotta warriors are alike. They are fascinating. All right, friends, that's it for reading at this point. Hopefully, you've answered the questions as we've gone through, and I will talk to you later. Thank you.